Hey everybody, this is Jurius Doctor, and today we're going to be taking a look at part 6 of my series Rubicon to Today, looking at the year 2018. Like the dwarves in Lord of the Rings, in 2018, the Capsuleers delved too deep and summoned up a demon. The Triglavian faction is a new faction to EVE Online. They're essentially a new empire. In 2018, it began with the discovery by Concord of a damaged Vedmak cruiser, which was hauled into a Concord research facility and analyzed. Somehow, the Capsuleers eventually got their hands on filament technology, which allowed them to open limited-time portals into abyssal dead space, essentially a pocket of subspace. Now, the Triglavians, as a faction, introduced 3 new ships, the Damovic frigate, the Vedmak cruiser, and the Lashak battleship. These new ships and new faction, powered by these abyssal singularities, brought in a new type of warfare, building out on their new unique weapon system, Entropic Disintegrators. If you want to read up on all the changes that the Triglavians brought to the game, you can see them in the link below. Entropic Disintegrators are a unique weapons technology powered by this abyssal technology, and they're one of the only weapons in the game that does an increasing amount of damage over time. They start off dealing very little damage and ramp up over 30 cycles until they reach full power. The drawback is that these weapons have 0 fall-off range. If your target gets outside of your optimal, you stop dealing damage and you have to start from 0. Now, taking about 2 minutes to ramp up to maximum damage, when fights can sometimes last as little as 60 seconds, can put you at a significant disadvantage. But when you're fighting asymmetrically against larger targets or bashing structures, these are an ideal weapons platform. And frigates, including the Vedmak, can top out at north of 250 DPS. Also coming from abyssal dead space are Mutaplasmids. These strange artifacts of weird space meet somewhere between fungi and nanotechnology, being a quasi-organic advanced technology able to be combined with Capsuleer and Empire technology to create new variant versions of that tech. Also changed by abyssal dead space are the Triglavians themselves, and they're unable to survive natively in our space without wearing these Triglavian encounter suits. These survival suits, or spacesuits essentially, form-fitting and very much appearing like regular clothing, seem to possess particular markings, color schemes, and identifications that put them more in line with uniforms and statements of belonging than ordinary encounter or survival suits may lead one to believe. A lot of the click pane of deploying planetary interaction was simplified in 2018, where we see new planetary interaction UI elements and improvements. These changes made planetary interaction easier to maintain and deploy, and improved the visual flow and feedback during initial setup. Things like new indications will show when nodes aren't fully set up, and being able to pin particular mechanics so that if you're dropping multiple nodes, it'll remember the details from the last node you deployed, and so on. This took the total number of clicks to set up a new PI planet down from about 300 plus clicks to about 185. It's still an awful lot of clicking for initial planetary setup, which makes setting up PI the most onerous part of it. But if you have the planning, the mindset, and the intestinal fortitude to keep it going, then it can be quite profitable for you as a new player. Please note that you have to be an Omega or a subscriber to the game in order to engage meaningfully in PI or take money off of your planets. If you want to learn more about that, I've created a tiny URL, and you can check out that link here. This year also brought in a few balance passes, Upwell 2.0 and Assault Frigates in particular. This saw a significant change to reinforced periods and vulnerabilities for Upwell structures, and how effective the time zone tank would be, which is setting your vulnerabilities in a time zone which is able to be met by yourself but not by your attackers. That was in a large way balanced for, and we see the reintroduction of assault frigates as a meaningful force in New Eden. Assault frigates gain the assault damage control, which acts like a regular damage control when passively fit, but can be activated for a very limited time, increase in all resistances to nearly 100%. Now, this typically lasts between 7 and 20 seconds, depending upon the size of vessel and the type of skills that you have and the type of assault damage control you fit. These are able to be fit on assault frigates and on heavy assault cruisers. This ideally places assault frigates and heavy assault cruisers as heavy tackle, but also makes them extremely effective in solo PvP. We also saw a significant change in the dynamics of nullsec space, with faction Fortizars replacing outpost stations. These faction Fortizars would have either the original ship model from the Outposts, or the structure model rather, or would have the design of the new Fortizar. Now, when replaced, which was a change that happened literally overnight, the new structures would have unique rigs fit to them that would be destroyed if the structure was unanchored. These rigs put the capacity of these formerly NPC stations well above the capabilities of the new Fortizars, but again, their uniqueness was not strictly limited to the rigs that came with them, and they do enjoy regular Fortizar benefits, but have unique model and structure names when unanchored. So these are still valuable assets. They're often traded between alliances when space is exchanged or when paying off debts, and some of the outposts do retain their original locations and rigs. We also see huge iterations in jump fatigue. Previously, moving large capital fleets had become extremely onerous due to changes that came in 2015-2016. In 2018, we see a lot of those restrictions dialed back, with max fatigue being brought down from 4 days to 5 hours, and the max activation delay reduced to 30 minutes from 9.6 hours. So previously, if you had to move a lot of big ships across a lot of space, you could be facing up to 24 hours of delays before you could reactivate if you ran your jump fatigue up. Now it's considerably less. And we also see changes to FCs and the Fifth State with the Monitor Flag Cruiser. This is essentially designed to be an anti-headshot ship, and it's based on the Enforcer model from Concord. This vessel can use MJDs, gets a 99% reduction for prop mod fitting, gets a 300% bonus to target painter optimal range, but a 99% reduction to target painter effectiveness, essentially turning the ship into the world's largest laser pointer. It gets 100% resistance to ECM effects, it cannot be jammed, and it gets a 70% resistance to all other E-War. If you're going to use a ship as the anchor for your fleet in large fleet engagements, the Monitor's pretty well perfect for that role, essentially being an anti-headshot ship for FCs. Though it can serve adequately as a media ship for those who would otherwise use a cloaky interceptor, such as INN and other organizations. The cloaky vessels are still the preferred vessel because, well, they're less expensive and they're easier to hide when you simply want to observe the goings-on. Speaking of troubled waters and big fights, there was quite the debacle over the overhaul of the chat system in 2018. CSP decided that in order to streamline some of the game code and also to provide more opportunities for offload to cloud resources, that the the in-game chat would be removed from the game and placed in Azure. This was overhauled to use a different chat system, and when it was reintroduced into the game, there were, shall we say, problems. The deployment was less than optimal, to say the very least. There were rolling blackouts of the chat, in many cases over a period of months. Local chat and corp chats were unreliable at best until they managed to work out all the bugs and get things going. Today, chat is more or less reliable. 2018 was also the final year of the Alliance Tournament. The Alliance Tournament was, and in large way, is still looked at as the premier event for organized PvP, team for team. And these Versus engagements were sponsored and organized by CCP with prizes, including unique ship skins for each Alliance Tournament winners. Previous Alliance tournaments went as far as helping to decide the fate of the Amar throne, with winners receiving permanent marker locations in space, such as the Titans placed off of the Amar Oris Emperor Family Academy station. Additionally, quality of life improvements were made this year. We now have cargo deposit, or the ability to drop and run from stations. Rather than having to dock to deposit your goods, you simply warp up to any Upwell Consortium structure, right-click on the structure, and choose Open Cargo Deposit. You can then transfer items from your active ship to the cargo deposit and click Transfer, and those goods will find their way to your main cargo hold. We also see new Osprey models and changes to ECM. To explain those changes, let's use the example of a Amarian ship coming across a couple of caracals. In this particular case, we have two caracals fighting with an Omen. They fire on the Omen fires back, and of course the Kaldari, being who they are, bring in their Blackbird friend to provide ECM. The ECM then begins making jam attempts against the Omen, which eventually succeed and land a jam, and the Omen is no longer able to shoot the caracals. However, under the new ECM system, the ship providing the jams is always able to be targeted. So the Omen then switches targets and concentrates on the Blackbird while still receiving damage from the caracals, unable to fight back against them because of the jams. This mechanic, where the person jamming you can always be hit and you will always have a lock on them, also works against the ECM drones. So please be aware, ECM is not a pull it out and automatically win card. It's not your trump card. It is going to be an effective strategy for sure, particularly when you're engaging in large fleets. ECM is still very effective against Logi, but it is not a instant win card. You can be targeted and killed by the people you are jamming. And there were significant changes to nullification in 2018, where we see interdiction nullified interceptors have their benefits reduced for half of the interceptors in the game. Previously, all interceptors were interdiction nullified and could simply warp straight through bubbles. Now, interceptors have had their roles divided in two. Each empire has a interdiction nullified or fast interceptor, and one combat interceptor, which instead receives tackle and combat bonuses. When it comes to sovereignty, the Upwell Consortium expanded their offerings to replace some of the parity of having player-owned starbases have their features rolled back. This includes the addition of the Tenebrix Sinojammer, the Ansiblex Jump Gate, and the Fairlux Sino Beacon. We also see a huge increase in player engagement with different activities in the game, especially new players coming into the game with the introduction of the activity tracker. And it's not necessarily that there is more engagement per se, but more that players are able to now see the metrics around that engagement and measure their activities as they grow through the game. This came in as an excellent change. I believe it was CCP Nagwal that introduced this. I may be wrong about that, but his team definitely worked on it. And I honestly think it's one of the better changes the game has ever made. It allows you to go down through all your different areas of engagement, be it resource harvesting, industry, exploration, combat, or encounters. And as you go down each of those chains, you will rack up points towards those activities, which will establish whether or not you are well practiced at those things, or if there are areas you may want to grow your interest. And one of the things I'd love to see CCP do is tie this in with the corporate recruiting tools within EVA Online so that you can match yourself up by a recommendation to the corporations that are engaged in activities similar to what you enjoy doing. But still, all in all, a great tool. Definitely look it up in the Neocom. We also see the emergence of new AI behavior tied to the advanced AI introduced with forward operating bases and the Blood Raider shipyards introduced in the previous year. In fact, CCP reported, Berger specifically talked about a massive NPC fight between NPC miners and patrolling NPC from another faction, with drifters being involved. No player saw this. They only discovered it when they were going through the server logs. There's a story about this at INN. You can see Emergent A.I results in all NPC fight, and special image credit goes to Devilish Lido from Reddit for this image. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the year 2018. Stay tuned for the final part of the series, the year 2019. I will be covering 2020 in its own separate video. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or if there's anything you want to know, go ahead and post that in the comments section below, and I hope you have a great day.